absolutely amazing that we are in week 2 of this new sermon series, Broken Beautiful, and I'm really excited about it. So what this is it's looking at spiritual depression. And so that's kind of what we've been looking at through this series, and what we're going to look at over the next couple of weeks is looking at the fact of and kind of addressing an issue that is in the church and is in many, maybe even people in here, that this thing which is so real and that believers do struggle with, and it is spiritual depression, which is defined as a severe sadness and darkness of soul linked to a crisis of faith. And so we're looking at how this is something that we can struggle with, that life's events happen to us and dark situations actually produce dark hearts within us. And so this is something that I've seen myself go through, and I've seen many other believers go through, and it's something that I believe God wants to really speak to tonight and continuing. And so what this series is looking at is kind of the outlook of all of this series, is that the pursuit of Christianity is not what is found in God's hands, it is the pursuit of His heart. And so what do I mean by this is that a lot of times when we journey in faith, a lot of times we spend a lot of time looking at God for what's in His hand, meaning that we look at God as in blessings and stuff like that, when really the essence of Christianity is not found in that. It's found in knowing God's heart. That Christianity is that of just another word for a relationship with your Creator. And so that's kind of what we've been looking at, and believing that life's most broken moments in God's hands produces beauty in our lives. And so we're looking at, so this series is a play on words. So you can read it broken and then beautiful, or you can read it broke and beautiful. That in the middle of our brokenness and in the middle of our situation is actually when God does so much of the work that is within our lives and grows us. And so, but to start out with tonight is I'm reminded of a story of when I was, I actually don't remember, I was probably 14 or 15, right? And there was somebody that I disliked extremely, right? There was this dude, and I did not like him a bit. So much so that he made me mad one day. And so I wanted to do what all boys do. And to settle my problems, I wanted to repeatedly hit him in the face with my fist. And so I told him to swear all the way up. I didn't expect the fact, though, that he did. And the next series of events that followed in my life were not pleasant and are a struggle to remember, because I told him to swing first, and he did. And it took me by surprise. And the next, like I said, events in my life were not the best. I ended up leaving this engagement with many bruised and cracked ribs and a broken arm. True story. He beat the crap out of me. True story. Is I was always that kid that had the mouth of a 7-foot bulletproof, kind of like Colin. It's like my mouth kind of embodied you, but my body kind of embodied like the middle school. You know what I mean? And so I was kind of like, do something, you know. And he did. And the next series of events were quite painful. And I actually, so after this little scruffle, I decided to hop on my 4-wheeler and ride off in shame. And I remember that I went to take a turn. And I remember this arm that the bone here was completely snapped in two. And I remember going to take a turn, and I remember the amount of pain that came out of this. Like, I remember just like having to just like nearly drop my arm and drive without it. I went for like another day or two without ever getting this checked out, until finally I swallowed my stupidity. And I went and got it checked out. And what was funny is that like my arm, There was a lot of pain there. It definitely didn't work right, unless like this is kind of thing. Then I reckon you've got all you need. You know what I mean? But for some of us, we want more in life, and so there was a lot of pain there, and it definitely did not work the same way. And so for the next part of my life, it had to definitely that bad decision definitely played a role in that. And why do I tell you that? Is because I think that in the same way in situations in our lives, I think that in the same way of my broken arm, there was pain. It didn't work the same way as it used to because of what had happened to it. It didn't work the same way. I couldn't use it the way it used to. I had effects of what I was dealing with, and so deep pain, and so I think that in the same way, what we're looking at tonight is, and kind of looking at this journey in spiritual depression, is that same exact thing actually through life events happen inside of our hearts. Is that through some events that take place in life, just like my little shindig, is there, maybe not in our arms, but in our hearts, there's a lot of great pain. They aren't the same after certain events that happen in our life, after certain relationships, after certain decisions, after certain moments, that our hearts definitely don't work the same way as they used to, if we're honest, and we remember that, like we talked about, we deal with, a couple weeks ago, we deal with a lot of scars. And so I think that in the same way that this thing plays so well in this heart, that my fight is that actually when you look in the Bible in the very beginning, actually 2 and 3 chapters in, it's just right from the get-go, is that there was another fight that took place. And what the fight was between God's will and man's will. And there was something that took place to where there was this decision to be made of obedience to God, or stepping out in search to be our own gods and have control of our own lives. And of course, we know the story is that is how that ended. Is that we see that there was a fight that took place between God's will and man's will, and we sinned in disobedience to God. So thus, this cut us off, right? He said that that God pushed us out of Eden, and so we had to leave our home. And so we see that through this is that our hearts are now, as we've talked about, the Bible refers to them as orphaned. And what this means is that God was meant to be the father and the supplier of all the heart's desires and everything that the heart would ever need. But due to the fight that took place, is that it was no longer the case. Is that God had to push us out of the garden, and we had to leave our home. And so in that thing, when we realize this, is that there's one thing common in all of humanity, is that because of the one decision that took place that would affect every single human being to come after that, is that we all realize, coming from common ground in here tonight, is that we all have broken hearts. Is that in this life, due to sin and due to our choice of disobeying God's will and search for our own autonomy, meaning the control of our lives, is that now we have to deal with the consequences of what that is. Is that God, through the sin that entered our heart, could not be around sin anymore. So thus, our heart became orphaned, and our Father had to leave. And so we see one thing common in all of humanity is that we have broken hearts. And because of this, though, is that we still have these desires that God was meant to be the one to feel. And so we still have these desires for community, for love, for friendship, for being known, for someone to understand us, to be loved. We have these same desires. The difference is now, though, due to our choice, is that God can no longer, as we are, be the one to fulfill it, because we have sin in our hearts, and and God cannot dwell around sin. So what we see here in this life is that we journey to new places dealing with the same old problems that has plagued humanity for thousands of years. And so we see that there's one human condition that everybody has in here tonight at one point in your life, is that we've all had broken hearts. And I'm not talking about a romantic where somebody, you fall in love and then somebody breaks your heart. I'm saying that the way your heart was supposed to behave and be loved and be supplied by your Father was broken. That bond between you and God was broken by sin, and now thus we deal with this. So we still have this desire for a satisfied soul and a satisfied heart, and so we desperately desire these things. And what we realize is that the things that we desire, though, most of the time are so much deeper than what we even realize. Is that there's so many things in this life that we desire deep down. And the reason why we desire them, the Bible actually points to something greater than anything else, than any self-help book, any book alludes to, is the fact that you desire it is because it was meant to be fulfilled by God and God alone. But now you journey through life separated from God. And so the problems that now arise in the human heart, such as loneliness, rejection, not being loved, to have people close to you push you away, that was simply something you were never meant to deal with. Is that your life, you were never meant to know what that was like. But because of sin and because of disobedience, you do. And so we have these things, and realizing that your heart is that now of an empty container. And you journey through life deciding what will fill it. Is that we have choices daily in our lives of journeying through life. And what you're really in the search for behind every decision you make is what will fill your heart. Is what you journey to in your brokenness and in your desire to be loved, and these godly desires, but now we just behave in them the wrong way. Is so now we journey through life and we have these deep desires, but the problem is that we're separated from God, so now we're subject to the things around us. Is that we journey to so many broken things because we are broken. And so what we see here tonight is when we don't find fulfillment in life around us, we become discontent inside of us. And so what I mean by that is that discontentment being defined as a lack of your heart being glad in that rest. You are restless and you're out of love with where God has you, and in love with an idea of the future where you believe you'd be better satisfied. And so we become discontent in this life. We don't mind where we're at. You can ask anybody in the room, and they probably have plans on, well, if I would be happier if. And so what is this? Is that we're discontent because we have deep desires and we've yet to have them fulfilled by anything around us because of how deep they are. And so we don't realize this, right? We have this idea that things around us can fulfill us. That's where John Mayer, even the Holy Prophet John Mayer, released a revelation that says, before you cheer, it says this. It says, I wish people could achieve all of their dreams like I have, just to see they're so empty. And so what we see here is that these things, that we have this belief that when I get this relationship, when I get this job, when I get these things, that in our age group is so common to hear. I always meet with guys, and the number one thing they're probably always going to bring up within 10 minutes is whether they're in a relationship, and if they're not in a relationship, it's why they want to be in a relationship. And why is this? And that's not meant for shame. That's a fundamental desire that comes straight from God, is that you were designed to be loved. The difference is, though, it's so deep inside of you that you journey and you try to find it through life but we seek from the wrong sources. It's because it's broken. Your heart's broken. And so you look to him or her to fill you when God is screaming, I'm the only one that can do that. because I know how the human heart works the best, because I made the human heart. And so we journey in pain and go into this, and that painful truth of the famous Richard Cory poem, if you know this poem, about halfway through it says, "Good morning, and he glittered when he walked, and he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without the meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head." And so we see through this famous poem is that this idea that somebody not even connected to the Bible but has realized is that there seems to be this symptom throughout humanity that why is it that every single person we hear that's a celebrity, but they're still dealing with so many things. And what we have to realize is just like John Mayer says, and so many others have said, there's infinite things we can use here, is that in this desire, whether it be money or sex or relationships or whatever it may be, is that what we find is that at the end of the day, it's not working. Is that just like Richard Cory, who was the best put together guy, we all dreamed that we were him. And then one calm summer night, he went home and put a bullet through his head. And so we see that in this poem, what it's painting is actually what Proverbs 14:13 is painting. And it says this, "Even in laughter, the heart may ache, and the end of joy may be grief." And so it says, even in laughter, the heart may ache. And so what the Bible is doing here is laughter is around a moment, right? You laugh because Kylan said a funny joke, or you laugh because Christian did something stupid. You know, like, and there's a moment of laughter. Christian's crying. Never mind. But we see here is that what the Bible is actually saying here, and what this proverb is alluding to, is you can have laughter and a little bit of satisfaction in a moment. But what you have to realize is deep down, the heart aches. And the end of joy may be grief. And so here's a very, very encouraging thing. But it is what the Bible is alluding to, is that there is nothing on this world that will give you joy. There's nothing in this world that will give you joy. And you say, no, that's not true. Think about a beautiful family, right? Husband, mom, they're in love, 3 kids, a dog. Think about this. I don't know why they got a dog, but think about this though. One family member of that entire family will see every other one of them, probably the youngest, will see every single other one of the family members dead. Right? You think of a relationship, you think of marriage, you think of an old lady and an old man, been married for 60 years, so in love, that's beautiful. Until at the end of life when the husband has to watch the wife die. Or the wife has to watch the husband die. Right? And so what the Bible is soberly promising here, and that we have to understand, is just like this proverb says, the end of joy, meaning on this earth, will always be grief. There's nothing on this earth that in the fullness and completion of it will carry joy with it. It'll always end in a little bit of grief because of sin. And so the Bible is soberly promising this broken world has no joy to give you, that it lies to you and it will produce grief at one point of it in the life. Is that there is nothing now in this world that is not subject to what sin has caused. Is that everything around you is fallen. We live in a broken and screwed up world. Is that you realize that as you get older and as you maybe even mature in your faith, that Tim Keller says one ways to know that you are saved is that you develop an emotional side of seeing the brokenness of life. And this is why Jesus was known as Jesus, the one who had it all together. He was a man known, a man well acquainted with grief, and a man of many sorrows. Jesus Christ himself was a man well acquainted with grief and a man of many sorrows. Why is that? is because when you know how the world should work and how it should be, and you look at how it is, there's grief there. Because when Jesus walked through the world and he looked at families and he looked at divorce and he looked at what was going on, there's grief there. Because why? He realized she shouldn't be ridiculed. She shouldn't be a prostitute. There shouldn't be these things going on. Broken homes, abusive relationships, people that promise to love you and then it all ends up being shattered and your heart gets broken. Jesus realized that as he walked through this world and as he looked around, it shouldn't be like this. And so that's exactly what Jesus did not live. Last week we talked about this idea. Jesus did not live a happy life. Jesus was not a happy person. He was a joyful person. Because happiness is defined by the external and joy is defined by internal. He was perfectly in relationship with his Father, so he was joyful. He was not happy, though. When he stood at the tomb of Lazarus and he wept, why did he weep? Humanity should never know what death is like. There's things in this life that you deal with that quite simply when Jesus looks at it, he cries because he knows you should never know what that's like. You should never know what it's like to lose a parent. You should never know what it's like to go through life and deal with an abusive father, to have someone promise to love you, in a broken situation to where in a promise to love you, and then in a night when you lose your virginity. I talk with so many people that guy or girl, it was going to be love and that they journeyed and they knew they were going to get married, but yet something happened and now they're dealing with a broken heart because they thought that was the person. And what they're dealing with now is so much brokenness. And Jesus looks at that situation and he doesn't smile. Is that Jesus actually looks at that situation and he cries because he knows this world is so messed up. There's no joy inside this world. It's all fallen and it's all messed up because you shouldn't know what it's like. Because what is broken cannot give wholeness. This world that's around us is so broken. And the world around you is broken just like us. So how do we find any sort of joy in this life if nothing around us is? Well, contentment in life is found in letting go and taking hold. So we let go of the thought that anything broken can produce wholeness. What you truly need is something no one around you can give you. Because what you truly need is something far too deep and complex for somebody else to understand. Because brokenness cannot produce wholeness. I'm broken, you're broken, everybody's broken. And you're journeying to someone broken to produce wholeness, but brokenness produces brokenness, and we're all just broken. So how do we have this? Is that Proverbs 14:10 says this, that the heart knows its own bitterness, and no stranger shares its joy. So what this says is that no one in this life will ever truly understand you. Yeah, I know we're really encouraging, but I swear it ends on a high note. But we have to realize this, that the Bible promises this, is that nobody in this life will ever truly understand you. There will never be somebody in this life who truly understands you. That you are so deeply woven with heart's desires and wants and needs so unique that nobody around you will ever understand you. The heart is deceitful above all ways, for who can know its ways? That's what Proverbs says. What it's saying is you don't even know what your own heart is. So how are you going to know what their heart is? Is that God saying, hey, you're broken, and I was supposed to be the one who held your heart, but now due to your choices and due to our sin, is that you're journeying around and we're a bunch of kids running around, a bunch of babies running around with scissors. And so what we run is that we're running and we're hurting ourselves and we're hurting other people. Why? Because we're taking something broken to something broken and wondering why it's not being made whole. And so we see this is that in this life you are utterly alone. You will never be completely understand. This is why there's a deep pain in even somebody you truly love and knowing deep down, I'll never be able to communicate how I truly feel. Is if you've ever had that moment to where it's someone that you think that should know you more than anything. But if you've ever had that, to where in that moment where you have to realize, I don't know how to put in words, I don't know how to communicate what I truly feel in this moment. And what we find is that Proverbs guarantees this same thing. You feel knowing that you will never be completely able to communicate to others, that no one around you can know you. So how do we be fully understood and fully known? Is that we take our hearts back home to where they began. That's good. Right? So that Psalms 126, 1-6 says this, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us. We are glad. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, without streams in the Negev. Those who sow in tears shall reap the shouts of joy. Because it says this, he who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy. Yeah. And so what it says here is that he who goes out, meaning that when you left home, like the prodigal son, is that when you left the presence of God, all you had was sadness. But when you come back home, you shall come with shouts of joy. And so what is this promising? What is Psalms promising? Is that in this world, you're going to find that it's so broken, and the only way for brokenness to be made whole is you bring your heart back to the very one who made it. And if you don't believe this is actually, and if it sounds just a little too cliche and a little too romantic, is let me ask you, outside of this, how has it been working for anybody else? You know, how many relationships have provided the fulfillment that we really need? Because in a moment of laughter, in a moment, we think this is it. But what we find is that in time to come, we'll find this is not producing. This is not fulfilling me. I've got such a deep desire, and frankly, you're not providing it. And they were never meant to. Is that our heart's home is meant to be in God's hands. The Creator, the created is fully known by the Creator. Right? The human heart's home is where it was first at, in God's hands. So this is why trials, dealing with spiritual depression, because there are real pains that come in this life. And once you meet Jesus, does not mean that all life's pain goes away. Actually, you could wager that you'll encounter more pain once you meet Jesus, because you have an enemy. Right? When you were not in relationship with God, you had one enemy. It was God. Is that you were an enemy of God. Now that you are in relationship with God, you have three enemies: the world, the flesh, and Satan. And so what we see here is that actually it's not come to Jesus and have a better life. It's come to Jesus and find life and find joy and find peace and find it internally, but externally your life is not guaranteed to get any better. Matter of fact, it may get worse. But what it's doing here is this is why God allows trials. This is why the Bible says in James 1:2, take joy, my brothers, when you face trials. Not if, when you face trials. Why? Because knowing that these trials produce character, steadfastness, endurance, right? Is that when it has full effect, right? You see the power of the Holy Spirit within you. So what this is the reason God allows trials to come into our life, and the reason why God allows some of our plans to be wrecked, is because His desire is for you to know Him and be satisfied in Him alone. And this is why He allows stuff in your life to come, because God, just like any other father, knows the one thing to discipline a child or to get a child's attention. And it's pain. Is that God uses pain as part of His plan to bring you back home. Because just like we know this with earthly fathers, is that you spank a kid when he's misbehaving. Why? Because there's a good thing behind that, right? Yeah. Every trial you ever encounter in life, there is a good thing behind it. And what it is it's a way for you to know God more. That's the meaning of life, for you to know God, to actually have your relationship with God restored. And that's the meaning of life. And then He constantly pulls you to Himself, and a lot of times He uses pain because nothing else would grab your attention like it would. And so the pursuit of Christianity in life is to know God's heart, not just His hand. Not just, I encountered another trial, my faith is dead. That's not how the Bible says, to strengthen weak knees. What it means is that we're meant to be a people that you're not just looking at God's hand, because you won't always understand God's hand. You're meant instead to know God's heart. It's that God's a lot more concerned with you knowing His heart and not His hand. Because you won't always understand His hand. Why did this not work out this way? Why am I dealing with this? Why am I dealing with depression? Why am I dealing with this? And so what you don't understand is that you're not just called to look at God's hand, you're called to trust in His heart. And the purpose of preaching or looking at God's Word is to see God and know Him for who He is, not just what He does. It's that it's a relationship. You're meant to know Him for who He is, not just what He does for your life. He's someone to know, not just someone to watch. And that's what God pulls you in, is to real faith. Is to where when God remains this just abstract idea that you pray to before you go to bed late at night for about 45 seconds, as long as He remains that, your faith will always be. You may be 20 dealing with depression, you'll be 45 dealing with depression, you'll be 65 dealing with depression, and you will die with depression. There's no hope. What God is saying is that I'm using this not for you to look at me as some abstract idea and just a guy in the sky. He's someone to know. Proverbs says, I have found a brother that sticks closer than a friend. And it's Jesus. And so He's someone to know. And so many of our relationships with God is He's just an abstract idea. We don't really know who He is, so thus when life trials come, we don't have any foundation. And we wonder, God, why did you allow this, instead of trusting that all things work together for the good of those that love God and are called according to His purpose. And so, seeing His heart can calm my heart, is that His plan works for your good because you are a child that He delights in, because He loves you. It's all of God's plans. Every event that happens in your life happens for His glory and for your good. Is that in the end of life, what you find is that you find that it actually happened for my good. The Bible also says that no discipline seems pleasant in the moment, but we know that discipline yields a fruit. Yeah. Is that later in life what we see is that there are moments, and what joy is not acknowledging the fact I don't want to be here. What joy is not looking at the absence of the problem, it's looking at the presence of someone. Is that you can be open and say, I don't want to be here. If I had it my way, my life would look a little bit different. But you're not wiser than God. And so you're not going to understand His plan. But you can know who He is. And then peace inside of you can guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus, as Philippians 4 says. And you can trust His plan even when it involves pain. And so we see here that God won't use a broken moment to let it write the rest of your story, but He'll take a broken moment and let it complete your story to where it's actually one of the best things that ever happened to your life. Is that the breakup, the relationship, the event you didn't want to happen actually turns out to be one of the best events of your life. Why? It's because God was wise enough to know that pain was the only way to get your attention to fully focus on Him, and He did it. So we can stop searching for satisfaction for our hearts, but start seeking above for satisfaction in our hearts. And so you realize nothing around you will fulfill you. The deepest thing that we have our hearts in is when I get the job, when I get the position, when I get the relationship, you're basing your hope on something that will fail. And so that's what this is saying. You should stop searching for any type of satisfaction around you, because in the long term you won't find it. but you can search for satisfaction inside of you, in your heart, not just for your heart. And so we all search for one thing in this life, whether we know it or not. Genesis and Revelation and Proverbs are the three only books in the Bible that speak about this. And we journey in life and we search for one thing, whether we know it or not. And when I say this, I'm going to have to unpack it because last night I stayed up at like 3 a.m. I even had to take like an hour and just go listen to worship music because this like blew my mind, and I was crying. But it's so awesome. So Genesis, Revelation, and Proverbs are the only three books in the Bible that talk about something. And it's what all of our hearts seek for. And when I say this, you're probably not going to agree with it, but I'm going to show you. Is that it's the tree of life.
Yeah.
It's that what all your heart desire and searches for, actually, if you could put it into like a symbolic thing, is what we're really searching for, is the tree of life that's in God's presence. And what do I mean by that? Is that the tree of life is first mentioned in Genesis, and then through our sin, God pushes us out of Eden to protect the tree of life. And then in Proverbs, it talks about when we walk in wisdom. The Proverbs says, above all things, seek wisdom. And when we actually walk in wisdom, you taste the tree of life.
Yeah.
And so what it means is that as you walk in obedience to God and in wisdom, is that you can actually taste the tree of life. That's where that saying comes from, taste and see that the Lord is good. What does that mean, taste and see that, I'm just eating a little bit of God? You know what I mean? Like, what? Like, it's referring to something. And it's referring to the tree of life. Is that when I walk in wisdom, right? And there's so much, honestly, this is, you probably don't care, but I had 2 pages of verses. But I thought, if I read these, we're just going to spend the rest of the night like reading verses. There's so much here to quite frankly, to back this up, but I couldn't include it because we would be here for ages. But is that, that's why it says, taste and see that the Lord is good, because when I walk in obedience, the Bible says we can taste the tree of life, that wisdom leads to the tree of life.
Yeah.
So what in the world does that mean? Is that we see that the tree of life is not just life, right? It's not just this idea of life. It's actually what God has, meaning the fulfillment of life. Is that inside of God's presence, there is a tree that represents not just life in itself, like alive and dead, but the fulfillment of life is found in the tree of life, the Bible says, right? And so, how do I find the fulfillment of life? Be at the end of my days and know that my life, to be so at peace and to be that, is that you actually, the Bible, just to take it literally from Proverbs, you know God, you walk in obedience, and you eat from the tree of life that you were meant to dwell around in the very beginning. Right. And I know this sounds a little bit weird, but let me break this down. Is that the bad news is that Adam kind of screwed us out of all this deal? Is that Adam through sin and Eve, she didn't get let off the hook? Is that they screwed us out of this deal? They did. Is that God pushed us out to protect the tree of life. And it dwells, in Revelation it said that the tree dwells near the throne. He's still got the tree of life. And what it means is he still has your fulfillment of life. But you're only going to find it when you journey to him. It's that the author of life knows how life works best. And so that we see here is that in the Bible, the tree, we already talked about that. And now, I struggle with this because this is like really deep and weird, but I swear it's worth it. Is that the problem is that the heart deals with nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
Is what I mean by that is this. Our hearts were made at first having access to the fulfillment of life, right? It was found in God. He was one-on-one with us. There was a perfect bond. So we had the access to the fulfillment of life. Sin wrecked that. Now we don't. We don't have fulfillment in life, and that's why we journey to other things trying to find fulfillment. And so what this is that our hearts were made at first having access to this fulfillment, and we know it. Life being fulfilled in the presence of God. And that's why I think about this. we have a deep, deep desire we all relate to. And what this desire is to be fulfilled, to be loved, to be known, and to be cherished. And why do we all have it? Our hearts long for what they remember, but they've never had. It's that your heart still longs. The Bible is clear. Your heart still longs for what you actually had, right, in the beginning with God, but now you've never encountered it because sin wrecked it. But God still designed the heart to find fulfillment in Him. And so, one commentator said it this way, is in our search for music even, for an emotional high to connect, we look for a song we seem to remember but have never heard. Our soul and heart longs for an embrace we all remember, but it's like we've never had. We seem to all know how we ought to be cherished because we all know our dreams of what we think that should be, and it's because in the beginning, that's how it was meant to be. And so what this says, and C.S. Lewis puts it best, most people, if they learn to look inside their hearts, would see that they would know that they do want something that this world can never give them. And what he's referring to is this, is that you realize that fulfillment is not found in this world, it is found above this world. And if you doubt this, just journey through life for a little bit, let me know how that works out. Because your life will be plagued by depression, and there will be no hope. Is that you weren't made to be fulfilled by this world, you were made to live in this world fulfilled by God. Is that we all know, because we were all meant to know it, is that humanity was never meant to have it taken away and be subject for a search for life outside of God. We are restless now, looking for life in some things now, when we can only find it in someone. And so the answer to life's care and life's desire, heaven wrapped it up in a person, Jesus. Is that the Bible says Jesus died on a tree, right? And this is kind of weird because he did, but he didn't. And what I mean by that is that the cross was a tree. But it's kind of like saying a car is metal. And so what do I mean by this? Is that you never refer to a car wreck. You never say, right, you would say, hey, two cars just had a wreck. You'd never say two pieces of metal had a wreck. You see what I'm saying by that? So the Bible on purpose uses this weird terminology here, and it uses it on purpose. Just like if you've got a fork and you drop the fork, you would say, I dropped my fork, not I dropped my plastic. You know what I mean? So the Bible purposely uses weird terminology here. Is that back in the beginning of time, is that it said that Jesus came to a tree. Back in the beginning of time, God told Adam and Eden to obey me with this tree and you'll live. Later, he would tell Jesus, obey me with this tree and you'll die. And so in the beginning, God told Adam and Eden to obey me with this tree and you will live. Later, he would tell Jesus, obey me with this tree in the Garden of Gethsemane and you'll die. Is that the first Adam took our life, the second Adam gave us our life. 1 Corinthians 15:22. For as in Adam all die, so also in Christ shall all be made alive. 45. Thus it is written, the first man Adam became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. So that it said that heaven came, Jesus being the second Adam. The first Adam screwed everything up, disobeyed, and gave us all death. The second Adam experienced death to give us all life. Is that it's heaven reversing. The Garden of Eden, the Garden of Gethsemane. It's a big heaven reversal here of his resetting up the Garden of Eden, but this time heaven wins. And so it's this. John 10:10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came so that they may have life and have it abundantly. I came to give them back the tree of life. I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. When we took from heaven's tree, God gave heaven for earth's tree. Is that in life, what you realize is when you look at the story of the gospel, is that it was you wretched in disobedience and deserving of hell. But instead, God looked down and He saw your disobedience taken from His tree, but instead of responding in anything, He responded in grace, and He gave Himself for your tree. That it should have been you up on the cross. And so in Eden, we said, this is God's will, but mine be done. In Gethsemane, Jesus said, this is my will, but God's will be done. It's that Jesus is fulfilling what Adam failed at. It's that Jesus said, Adam said, this is heaven's will, but mine be done. Jesus said, this is my will, but heaven's be done. He swapped it. Jesus is saying, I'm going to be what Adam should have been, but he failed. And I'm restoring that to you. As God came offering you a way back to Him in the fullness of life found only in Him, because that's where the tree dwells, with Him. George Herbert put it beautifully when he wrote in a famous poem about the sacrifice, is that he wrote this, and this is Jesus speaking. All ye who pass by, behold and see, man stole the fruit, now I must climb the tree, a tree of life for all, but not for me. Is that George Herbert? Let me say it again. All ye who pass by, behold and see, man stole the fruit, now I, being Jesus, must climb the tree. A tree of life for all of you, but not for me. Is that you see that Jesus came to fulfill what Adam had failed at, but He knew that to pay this price and to pay your death, He took your death to give you His life. And so when we realize this and when we see this joy, J.R.R. Tolkien said this, the writer of the Lord of the Rings, my dude, is that when we see this love given for us, we have access to joy beyond the walls of this world. And in closing, another guy put it this way. So in life, love the people you love, embrace others, kiss and love and be merry, but let it all be used to point back to the true giver, the true blesser, the true tree of life given to us so we could once again have access to the tree of life. And so that's what the message is. And so how does this apply? Is that a lot of times when we journey through life and we don't understand how God can use this broken moment, that earth's worst day, when we crucified the very one who made us, heaven made it our best day. Because we were restored to life. So what God's saying is you may not ever can understand what I'm doing, but just trust me. That in life as we journey, is that situations can be used in which we don't understand, why am I dealing with this? Why am I here? God, I wish this would have turned out differently. But what you have to realize is that your wisdom, your fallen, is that you are living in the way that your will is warring against God's will, and we may not see it, but Tim Keller put it beautifully one time. He said, God is so good that what He really does, when you pray for something to happen and He says no, what He's really saying is, if you pray for what I knew, if you were to pray for what I knew, you'd ask what I give. It's so that when I come to see God being as good as He is, in His majesty and His wisdom and in His love, what I see is that every decision He decides to give me in life, I can trust it. Because if He would give His very self for me, why do I not think He does have my best interest at heart? But it may just not be the way we think it is. And so we can journey through life. A lot of times the cause of spiritual depression is simply this, is that you've messed up what are you looking at. Because you're looking at your will and not God's will. You're looking at, God, I really want this. I think this would be great. But God is not trapped in this moment. He sees the story. And And so a lot of the times the very same things we war against and we're displeased in this life, what we actually have to see is that the very thing that God decides to do for us is the very thing we should ask for, but we don't know to ask for it. And so as Christians and as believers, as we journey through life, and when you really find that God is the answer to life, and that you're done chasing any other thing, because it will fail you, and you will end in heartbreak. And I know that from experience. And when you know that God truly is the only one who can satisfy you, you learn to start trusting whatever He gives you. Because really all things do work together for the good of those that love God and are called according to His purpose. But it's His purpose and not your purpose. And His purpose, though, is a lot better than your purpose. And we can trust in that. Let's pray. Father, we just thank you so much tonight. God, I just pray that whatever the many situations that are going on inside this room, Father, I just pray tonight, God, that maybe in life and something as serious as spiritual depression and as anxiety, maybe we don't classify it as we're depressed, but if we're honest, every day we're anxious, we worry, we don't really believe, God, that every decision that you have for us is for our good and for your glory. So we think that we have to find our fulfillment. Father, I just pray that we can have peace, knowing that our lives rest in the hands of someone who deeply loves us. And when we rest in that and we see your goodness, God, that you've shown us through your word, God, and when we spend time with you in prayer and in time alone with you and we get to know you for who you are, it should our anxiety goes away. God, it's replaced by peace. It's replaced by, I don't know what's going on, but I can trust God because I am in His hands. And if He can even use the cross of Calvary, which looks so horrible, but turn it into so much good, then I can trust Him with the situation I have going on in my life. So, Father, with all the situations going on tonight, God, I just pray that we can carry them back to the place they're meant to be carried, and that is your presence. God, that we don't hide it in here. God, that we don't hide it from other people, even if we need to talk to somebody about what's going on in our lives, but we trust you. God, and that our depression and all of that you can conquer it with peace and with joy when we look and we see you for as loving of a Father as you are. And it's in your sweet name I pray. Amen. Let's worship.